Our next guest is a Californian designer based in London. Before moving to Europe, she worked with contemporary artists in Los Angeles, including Mike Kelley. She has taught architecture and design at the Royal College of Art and the Architectural Association in London. She founded Industrial Facility with Sam Hecht in 2002 in London to investigate and contextualize products, furniture and environments so that their potential for progress is revealed. Among the clients are Drog, Amazin, HERMAN MILLER, Issey Miyake, KitchenAid, Louis Vuitton, MUJI, and many more. Please welcome Colin.
Thank you. It's a big honor to be here, to be invited, and thank you to Alexi and ECAL for having me. These are my former students you hear cheering. I hope they're my students. And to the IKEA Foundation for inviting me, including me today. I'm Kim, and this is my partner and husband, Sam. I'm trained as an architect, and Sam is an industrial designer. We have what I call crossover dreams. It means simply he's English, I'm American, he's a guy, I'm a gal. He trained in something completely different than I did, but there's something in our conversation, there's something that is quite productive about how we speak and how we work. And I'd like to share some of that. We started our studio to talk about how we never actually see a glass that's not in someone's hand or on a table, in a room or in a building. And this was, at the time when we formed in 2002, about 15 years ago, a very anti-position at the time, when industrial design, all of the tools for industrial design meant that you could float. You could build something digitally, you could float it, look at it 360 degrees in fictitious white space. But of course, that's not how we live with things. So we said, let's think about context. Let's think about cultural context, spatial context. And we believe this to be still relevant. We work on many different kinds of projects. You can see a selection of them here. And because we have clients in all different areas and we don't specialize in one area, it allows us for the light to shine sometimes on projects where you least expect it. So we might be working on furniture for the home and it shines light on a different project of ours or in a completely different domain, and that thinking has no place in the project we're actually working on at hand, but certainly has relevance in the conversation. And this conversation is an ongoing factor in what we do. We're currently experiencing what's called a midlife crisis, I guess. It's called a monograph. And so we've spent the last 2 years looking back at our work, at 15 years of work, which is early, I think, to be fair, in the days of a studio. But this meant that we use our current lens to look back and contextualize our own work. It's a very difficult thing to do, and we happily have other people to help us with that, and that's coming in the spring. But just to say, that's the point of view that I have right now about how we live with things, what we said 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and what we're talking about now in terms of the world. And this concept that we came up with 10 years ago called Product as Landscape, we made our own little book about it. And it was really to talk about the landscape, products themselves as landscapes, not as monuments in a landscape, which is how most companies think about making things. They think we'll make something that is a beacon or that will draw people, not just to consume it necessarily, but in a way of living around it. So companies imagine, we've worked for instance, Epson. When we did a printer for Epson, they imagined that, wow, people would really like to see the logo of our company in their home. But of course, that's completely irrelevant. That's just how the company imagines we're living around these things. So the first way of thinking we wanted to posit was about what we call user-object relations. And the first model is a Renaissance model. And this is something that we find, this paradigm we found actually really problematic. The Renaissance model, if you can imagine, the Renaissance time was humanism, the human at the center of everything. And while it's important we're designing for people and we're a planet full of people, we're also a planet full of a lot of other things. So this is the Renaissance model where the human is in the center. And everything is designed as if the human is in control in a one-to-one relationship with everything in our world. And this was true then. This has, of course, changed a lot with the internet, and I'm going to talk a lot about how this model evolves. We, of course, didn't believe in the Renaissance model. There were a lot of people at the time talking about humanism and designing for humans, and so it was a very controversial thing to come out with and say, well, we don't believe the human should be at the center. We should be thinking about products as they relate to other things in our space, not just by the same brand, but in the way that we're living. And I'll give a few examples of these kinds of projects because we still work on these kinds of projects. And this is, again, this is pre-internet, so this is before the coffee maker is going to talk to our phone, which we can control, etc. This was a very one-to-one relationship with the coffee maker, but MUJI came to us and said, could you make a coffee maker? And they didn't come to us and say, could you make one that is relevant to the way we live now, because we're having kitchens where there's islands and we're having 360-degree relationships to products. That was us. That was our thinking. And so this is the first coffee maker that is spherical, and it was just something we believed could happen technologically. We had to argue with the factory. Oh no, we've never made anything like that before. We've never put the reservoir is always behind. And we said, but it is possible, it can be done. And they did it. Sorry, sorry for my hair. The second project from MUJI was a second phone, and this is a project that depends on everyone having a horizontal surface, which pretty much everybody does. You don't need a table, you don't need a phone base. At the time, all the mobile or the nomadic phones in the home had a cradle, so there were all these cradles and wires and bases and etc. in the landscape. And we said, well, sometimes you just need a phone where the phone rings and you can pick it up, or you can dial someone whose number you know, and that's what this phone is. So the face, it's very dormant, and when you pick it up, the mouthpiece pops up. And of course, when you place it back down, it's like a brick. So you don't see it. It doesn't say, I'm made by whoever I'm made by. It lives with you, but in a very quiet way. And this, again, is from MUJI. This has a contextual relationship in a different way, not in a spatial way, but in a kind of habitual way, in that we travel with passports. And those we found the passport format has something, there's something familiar about it and something official. It's precious, you keep it. And that's not true about most stationery. That's kind of throwaway in a way. So we made a passport memo. It's been very popular. They tried to stop making it and had to bring it back because people are depending on it. But essentially, it imbues your personal notes with the kind of reverence that you would your passport, something you would take care of. And it's still an extremely inexpensive product and accessible. I wanted to include some work for Herman Miller because with Herman Miller, it's an amazing client in the States, and they have us constantly working at the world of work, looking at the world of work. And as I say, I'm including these projects because you can't look at the world of work and not look at how we're living. And we've just returned from a big research trip with them to the States to look again at the future of work. What is the future of work? And I'm thinking about what is the future of home life? Because they're not so far apart anymore. There's been a big movement in work to bring things from the home to make work more comfortable or more familiar, or allow people to stay in work a lot longer. And likewise, there's the reverse, taking things from work so that you can work at home, back from home. So these worlds are flipping over. And this was a project that we based on a lot of, called formwork. It's desk accessories. It's made only in a way that Herman Miller would make it, not in a way that MUJI would make it, for instance. And it was based on the reality of the things that we bring to work with us. We're no longer pushing pencils and have only a few things. We have some odd things that don't fit in the kind of desktop storage that we normally have. So we did something slightly, we did something slightly topographic so that we could stack like a bento box or a skyscraper, the same idea where you have real estate. And that's the kind of language of the landscape. It's also for mobile workers, so people can carry things. But what's happened is people have, if they have access to it, they want to take it home because it works in their kitchen, or it's kind of placeless in a way. And this is something that we made. I saw an IKEA table that reminded me because it uses planks, and somehow we were looking a lot at the public landscape and how tables work and how they're democratic in the public landscape. If you see a picnic table, there's no hierarchy there. It's implicit that it's a shared table. It's not going to be owned by someone. No one's at the head of the table, etc. And so we want to bring that into the home as well as a kind of sharing space. So taking it from the outside and bringing it into the home. And this is context, I guess, unto itself. This is a bath radio, something probably you'll only find in Japan mostly. But we related the product directly to something else you would find in the bath for MUJI. So one is the shampoo or the body soap, and one is the sound with the same kind of top. And this was a conceptual project that talked, I wanted to also say context can also be in relation to an industry. So in this way, we were talking to other hairdryers. So we had all, at this point, when this project was made for wallpaper, we had all been living with hairdryers that were kind of subject to the evolution of the company. And not really, no one was breaking with that, and no company would come out, Philips or GE or BRAUN, or no one would come out and break their own form, right? Because there's economy in the scale of the mass manufacturing. And we thought, well, why is it the hairdryers have to be like that? There's nothing to say that it couldn't be like this. And in a way, it was a kind of coffee maker moment. Whoops. Yeah, and just briefly about the knife, that sometimes there are, for lack of a better word, I'll call it trends or directions. This knife was a direct reaction against what was called ergonomics in products at the time, which became a style and is a kind of affectation. It's based on science, it's based on observation, it's based on all the things you would think would be absolutely valuable. And then when it came time to design knives ourselves, that is not we didn't want to go in the same direction. So we made a tool that was based on the idea that, like a screwdriver, you could pick up from any direction and find it useful. And so the knife, you shouldn't have to hold a knife in a certain way for it to work. It is actually to think about the knife as a tool, not as a specialist tool, which was starting to happen in products. You can see that we're reacting. We're quite reactive, I guess, but in a very quiet way. And this was a chair that was based on thinking about the things that we do choose to live with. We want them to stick around for a long time. They should be things that we care about and not things that we throw away. And so what might that be, and how might we make that with new technology that allows for it? And so it was the combination. I'm sure a lot of you know about robotics and handcraft and how they come together and make something possible. So it couldn't have been possible, this chair, without digital tools, and yet it's a handmade chair. So there is a funny contrast and a funny combination of effects as a result, as an experiment. And then finally, to say that we looked at, for the Biennale in Saint-Étienne a few years ago, we looked at a lot of different products and how we wanted to show recent products that we thought were interesting, and how we might spatialize that. I think Sam, of course, got more excited about this because he didn't train in architecture, so he really wanted to make some architecture. So the idea with the pavilion was that we live around things that are close to each other, that there's adjacencies and there's relationships, and we should be able to see and understand these relationships and be sensitive to them. And so it's quite stark in a lot of ways, but it's very rich because of the juxtapositions as well. And then lastly, in terms of a product, this was an experiment in something else that's coming, which is this desire and need for customization, for everyone to want to have their hands on their own style, their own look, their own home, their own way of living, and be quite expressive about it, this individuality, which is super important. And on the back of that, manufacturers trying to grapple with mass customization. So this is a small Swedish company, and just a little film we made to try to show how simple it could be. It's a very basic idea. 3 tops, 5 shades, 2 materials, kind of easy, hopefully easy to specify. It's turned out to be more complicated than one would like. And now I'm going to talk about the future. These are this and Crossover Dreams, I should say, are Ed Ruscha paintings and drawings, Los Angeles artist. And this is the second model of product as landscape. It's very different than the Renaissance model I showed. This has to do with the contiguity of objects. And that means this model for us we call dependence. And dependence slightly gets a bad name, but I'll show the film first. It's where the human is no longer now in the center, but is on a level field with everything that we live with, including landscape, really. There should be a landscape icon there. And that we're no longer talking in a one-to-one relationship to things, but things are talking to other things, ostensibly through us, but actually even independent of us, they're talking. So this is before the Internet of Things that we made this model, because we wanted to talk about the human having a more democratic existence with the things around us, and then therefore that would shape the way we think about things, and it would shape the way we think about our responsibility to the things and to our world. So we formed another branch we call Future Facility to specifically deal with the Internet of Things, because network technologies will reshape the way we live. And these technologies mean different things for different products. One of the first ones we'd made was a toothbrush, and we met with BRAUN, and their idea for an internet-connected toothbrush was to say, wouldn't it be great if your toothbrush could report directly to your dentist and tell your dentist exactly how you're brushing? And we went, ooh, that sounds terrible. It's already I look at my toothbrush and feel guilty. What would instead make me feel better about my toothbrush? And what's actually the biggest problem about my toothbrush, my electric toothbrush? And a lot of the problem is simple. I don't know when I need a new head for my toothbrush, where can I find it? How do I know? What's my model number? I'm out without my toothbrush. I don't know what it is. So we made a simple way of ordering and reordering. This is before the Amazon button, by the way. I mean, these are like all ideas in the air, right? So simultaneously. And then we also made a way for charging it on the go, because you have a portable life, you have a nomadic life, and you take your toothbrush and you don't take the base for charging and it runs out of juice. So, and then this product was a combination of things where we came to a lighting company and said, well, the way that we live with light, you know, another lighting sort of commission, you might say, a client came to us and we said, well, we're noticing something that often when we need light, we also need power. To power all our devices. So why don't we bring the two together, because they're electronics, and doesn't that make sense? And he was willing to go on the adventure. To his credit, he absolutely said, wow, this is interesting. Maybe this will move us as a company in a different direction, and it changes everything. It changes how I distribute, it changes how I sell, it changes who I say I am. I have a big mind. This is great. This is exactly what I was thinking. And this USB lamp, we're working on another version of it. But it's a scary thing to have technology in a product when technologies are, this is USB. And there's already USB-C, and there's induction charging, etc. So, you know, things become obsolete much more quickly with technology as well. This is it installed. And this was another network project, networked security system and phone system for the home by a very brave Swiss client who was working previously on audio and saw the end of his ability to work in that domain, as people don't own audio anymore. So he thought, well, why don't we make some products that are not like this? Because this is the world of sensors. It still is the world of sensors. This is actually a shot from Los Angeles, one of the best and biggest new galleries. This is as good as they could get their sensors to be at the time. So what would it be instead if we had other things that we could live with in a different way? Why do sensors have to be like this. This is all about the company's evolution. It's not about how we should be living with things at all. So this is a sensor, a camera. It's magnetic, so you can reposition it easily. It's very quiet. And this is just an idea of how it might live in your space. It's not shouting at you. It's not the, you know, I'm sure a lot of you look up and see your smoke sensors, smoke alarms, sprinklers, whatever at the ceiling and say, why are they like that? And there's just a long trail of why they're like that. So I just wanted to posit a few other thoughts. And one is about how we think about more than product, so beyond the edges of the thing. This is last month in San Francisco. So this is an Uber driver. And we think about Uber now, we sort of talk about it as the future. It's a disruptor. It's disrupted all of the transportation industry. It's playing into the desire for no one to own anything, for young people not to even want to own a car, need to own a car. And yet, and it is disrupting, it is seriously disrupting all those industries, and yet this is the actuality. Sorry, this is the reality of the in-car. I mean, it's not just his two phones and their cords, but look at his commands on his steering wheel and his, whatever you call it, the speedometer and all the dials and modules and the radio and the everything. It's everything. What a hideous landscape it is. And what a field of opportunity before we get to having electric cars, which are or driverless cars rather, that are coming, that are looking more like offices on the go or rooms on the go, potentially. And you can see they have no dials, no anything. And this, I wanted to say, we've had this for a long time, and it's really based on the idea that when someone comes to you and they say, oh, let's do a refrigerated project, and we've got all of the research that says everybody also wants something, since it has cooling, it means it has water. So let's also make a washing function in it. And if we're washing dishes, then why don't we also wash clothes? We could wash clothes. And in the end, you have nothing. You have a non-product because you've tried to jam so much into it that it becomes unviable. It's like an Escher drawing, actually. And this one I include because I think it's nice to read products in your own landscape as setting out a set of promises. And we should all try to understand as we buy into those products and we say we want to live around them, what's it promising me? In this case, the washing machine was promising her more time. And what did she do with that time? And then, you know, if you look at the kind of research, the most recent research that says, well, now that we have Hoovers and we have washing machines and we're not doing all the manual labor, we have to actually join a gym because we have to make an effort to be physically active because we're no longer scrubbing and sweeping. And so it's given us one thing, it's given us the time, but it's taken away something else. It's really, so just to be aware, I guess I'm saying just to be aware of what you're promising when you make something as designers, and be aware of what something is actually promising you versus what it's delivering. And now I'm going to move to a very conceptual project that we worked on. And the first thing that was based on is the idea of this massive scale of change that's happening right now. I mean, the future is coming at us faster than ever and at a huge scale. So this is architecture for servers. This is not a building that is made for people. And if you think about how large the scale of that is, and think of the scale of an Amazon warehouse as well. This is made for the movement of goods, and there are people in it right now, and evidently it'll be robotic eventually. Just the scale of change that's happening, even if you don't see it, it's happening. So this last project is conceptual about how we're living in the future, specifically for an elderly population. This was commissioned from the Design Museum in London, who had an exhibition, I guess it was last spring. I think it was in the spring. I asked several designers to visit this topic of how we'll be living. And in fact, the trolley that was shown earlier, the scooter was shown. That was one of the projects from it. But we decided to make something that addressed our thinking about products themselves in the future. What might they be, and how might we live with them? And it was based on real life experience, where household appliances, we can easily buy them. However, they're also inherently difficult to manage over time. So we had older parents who were finding that their washing machine broke down. And because they're older, they're naturally more vulnerable to the service people who come and say, oh, you need a new machine. And then they say, okay, and they say, okay, well, you're the expert, you know. And then they say, oh, well, someone else is going to have to take away your old machine. How do I do that? How do I dispose of it? How do I, yeah. So they're inherent in that is there's the promise, and actually over time and longevity of the product, how do you actually live with it for the entire life cycle? It's not easy. So when you're older, if you're 20, yeah, and the washing machine breaks down, it's not a big deal, you know. You can go and find another one, and you can look on the internet and find someone to take away your old one, or you're just renting it anyway, you don't own it, etc. If you're 50, it's, you know, oh, it's expensive, and it means I can't go on holiday, or you know, you have different considerations. If you're 80, it could take a lot of time to sort out how to deal with this, and there's a lot of angst and worry that naturally comes anyway. So the things that promised you initially to make your life better now become a burden. So as we age, we become less likely to navigate the conditions that shops and manufacturers require of youthful customers. So what's easy for us is not easy. And coupled with that, most Internet of Things products are designed to make us feel good about giving away our data. So we do that without thinking about it now. So I'll talk about this a bit more actually. So younger people, digital natives, are doing that naturally. They're giving it away. They don't really care. They don't know what they're giving away. They're used to navigating this way. They're teaching each other how to use these devices. And we're all trying to catch up on how fast things are coming. People are being born with it behind us. What is beyond Gen Z? It's the next one. And the aging population, this is what we posited for the apartment. The aging population is abandoned at the exact time when they actually need better products, increased assistance, and simpler servicing. So, whoops, I want to go back to this. And this is a bit more about the internet, where attention has become the most valuable currency in the world. And I'll talk a little bit about attention economics, and it's because it's a limited resource. We only have so much of it. So how much attention you pay, not only when you buy online or when you buy, but when you look or browse, that's all being quantified. And I'm sure that's not a surprise. But we were just in San Francisco this past summer, and I think our minds were absolutely blown about how much is actually being quantified and how that is considered research now. And that is considered to be determining our future. So where you pay attention is actually really valuable to someone. It may feel, I think as a human, it feels quite fleeting where you pay attention, but actually to others they're paying attention to what you're paying attention to. So this is the rise of attention economics, and these are the kinds of big companies that are really investing in that. So this is Amazin Apartments. It's called Amazin Apartments because we took Amazon as an example of an expanding company, as an expansive organization that had the possibility to make something for the future. And it's purely fictitious. We didn't get their permission. So the Design Museum said, okay, we can't call it Amazon. So we said, let's make it Amazin. That will be better. So I call it Amazin. Sam calls it something else. But what did we want to do with it? Amazin. He calls it Amazin. So it sounds like Amazon, but I think it's just Amazin. Anyway, the whole point is that it removes angst from this population, the older population. It gives a positive experience of progress. That would be a goal, so you don't feel like your world is closing in and things are getting worse, or my things are getting dumbed down for me. And that I don't mind. It also is the premise that older people don't actually mind if they trade their data for good servicing. Why would they? They're actually getting something really valuable in exchange. These are These are provocations. This is not a we believe the world should be like this. These are provocations meant for a cultural environment at the Design Museum to make people think. And the thing for us was that the products themselves become architectural in scale. What would it be for Amazon, instead of delivering the toaster, the oven, the individual products, why wouldn't they deliver an entire wall? Why couldn't they give an entire, why wouldn't a product be a piece of architecture? And what might that be? And the apartment itself for the inhabitant would be fully supplied, serviced, maintained, and managed from the outside, so uninterrupted. Your living space is uninterrupted by the burdens of maintenance and servicing. And the data, which you've traded gladly, is analyzed to improve the quality and revenue of the company and the quality of your life and your experience in the apartment. So the apartment, of course, couldn't be just a module. We had to think of it then in terms of an entire architecture. So what if Amazon would make an entire building, and how might the form of that building be? And we looked a lot at, sorry, I'm going over time here. We looked a lot at older English residents that separate service and living from the quarters. So there's two sides of the wall, and this is the apartment side, where each wall is a product. There's washing, a fridge. We just did 3 modules as an example, and then beverages. And then on the other side of the wall, you can see, is the servicing side. So you can see that all the pieces are numbered. It's just a suggestion about how Amazon might service that side from behind. You can see that there's screens, and I'll just show quickly what those are. So these are the 2 sides. That's a whole nother topic. These are the 2 sides. So there's a living side and a service side. The living side, you can see, is very suppressed, intentionally very suppressed. And that's not to say we should all be living like this. It's to say it could, however you live, could be however you would like, but the product doesn't need to take up your entire life. And the servicing side is just quite, again, there it is. Serviced in this model either by a human or robotically serviced. That's the 2 sides of the fridge. And that's that part. Thank you. Sorry, I've gone over time.
Thank you very much, Kim. Let's go on the sofa. We still have a little time for that.
Okay.
So from what we heard and the way you see things, design improves the way we live. And it has to improve it for everybody, every kind of population. So that's really what you're working on and what you will keep on working. And how do you transfer that to every kind of population? Because that's the question, that it benefits all.
Yeah, it should benefit all, but I think we have to be realistic about how we work. I think we only have certain opportunities to, and I wouldn't say our only opportunities come from clients, but because we do have self-initiated projects, and in those, I actually should have showed this. I didn't show those, but I think as a designer, you have to take the opportunity, and you're given a brief or a mandate to do something, and that's what, I guess what I'm trying to say is you should always be looking for something beyond what you're being asked, because you're probably onto something that the company is not, because they've got their rose-colored glasses. Right. So they might think they're being generous in a way, but you can also help them to be generous. You can help them, especially as an external designer, think about new things. And we tend to have clients who really want to be challenged in that way. They want to they're not afraid that if you're doing a project and you think, oh, here's another territory you might go in. They're quite excited because...
But so it means it's not every client. I mean, it's the clients who come to you, they know that you will go further than just proposing what they want.
I think they come because, or I don't know why they come, but I think they stay because we're quite generous and honest about the work. In other words, if the work throws up other discussions in our studio, we also say, hey, but it made us think also about this. And it doesn't take away. We absolutely answer the first problem. And also give them a reason for it to be like that. We don't give 20 possibilities, or, I mean, it comes with really invested thinking. But if something is thrown up that relates to them, we generously share that. And that's what's made conversations, I think, really rich, and also opened up other territories for improvement, not just in their work, but in how they're doing good work.
And as you were saying, a product is not just a product, it is the space in which it is.
Yeah, I think we can't forget that, however we are living. In San Francisco, what I saw is that the companies are becoming larger and producing more home-like spaces, as I said, and everyone is fighting in that city. It's so expensive to live, which is what's going to happen with population explosion in cities as well. It's so compressed, you're living, that you actually have very few things that you're living with, very little ownership. There's a little bit of nostalgia operating, so someone might have a radio that they had when they were a child, or a chair that their father had, or there might be a few invested mementos, but they're not really investing in their what was called the living space.
Right.
They don't have to. They're not owning their office, and they don't have to own anything at home. They're just quite fluid because the technology allows us to be. And I think if we had a lot of presentations from futurists, etc., coming, and this kind of fluid way of living in the world is not so attached to objects. So it's a real crisis about, well, then why do you make a coffee maker? You know, is it really important for, you know?
But is that the vision that you see the future? Then everything will be fluid and we have to adapt to every environment?
I can't see. I don't have a crystal ball. So I don't think anybody does. I think all of these things that we've been hearing over the past, over the day as well, I think things are coming, but we don't know. Every industry is trying to grapple with this amount of change, and all I know is that everyone who presented to us said, if you're thinking about change now as a company, whatever you're thinking about is too slow. So you've got to make 5, 10 leaps forward into I mean, this is amazing, right? We have the possibility to really envision fantastically.
But it can be scary at the same time.
It's very scary because there's no guarantee. So all that risk, the risk limitation that we've been practicing in terms of mass producing of objects, that takes too long. Right? So there are too many companies that are quite expansive in their expansive format now that are just leaping. They're just going because they're young, they're free, and they can, right? And they don't know the cost of it, and they don't have a legacy, and they don't have longevity. So I think, hold on, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
All right. I was reading one of your interviews, and you were saying when you do design things, you need to design things that will last. Not quick, cheap, and good. You can get the 3 of them. You can get only 2.
That's a famous one. If someone comes to you and says, we want it quick, we want it cheap, and we want it good, you can only have 2 of those 3 things. So you can have it cheap and you can have it quick, or you can have it cheap and you can have it good, but you can't have it quick, for instance. So it's,
So what is the answer then when you have clients coming to you and saying...
Well, it either takes longer or it's not going to be as good. Something has to
go.
go.
So it's going to be natural selection.
Yeah, I think you have to be smart about your choices, which is that's why I showed Branca, because you have to be smart. If a factory has 2 capabilities, you have to think really cleverly about how to use each to their best. Right. So it's a little bit like that. If you've got 3 things they want, you have to get the best, because if you compromise on all 3, you can imagine that would be a very mediocre product.
Let's see if there are any questions in the room. We have time for 1 maybe. So if you have a question, it's the moment to raise your hand. Over there.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about, you explored a lot of the Internet of Things. And like right now, obviously, the fact that if you've read, Move Fast and Break Things by Tamplin, and understanding that in many ways, because we're giving so much data around about ourselves, we're in many ways becoming a product for these companies. So from the perspective of the designer and working with organizations that have so much information on consumers, like what becomes the role of the designer when there's a lot of Frankenstein by numbers for development?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of products are becoming inexpensive because we're giving away our data, right? So they're completely affordable, whereas you might have previously put a thermostat system in your house, it would have cost £1,000. Now you can get a Nest for 200 or something. But why is that? Because what's valuable is you're giving them your data. Okay, and it doesn't personally matter to you. Maybe it helps you manage your own usage, and that makes you feel better about yourself and the planet, etc. But we don't even know the value of our data, and actually, I don't think everyone else does either yet. But what they're doing is they're banking it, right? And if they're collecting it, it's like money. I mean, it is currency, right? In some way, and I think we can all be conscious of that. Who you're giving your, as I said, who you're giving your attention to, actually. Did that answer your question? As designers, I think the products themselves will change, and we should all be thinking about that, because if they are the vehicles to giving away data, that's why we didn't want to design a toothbrush that collected your data or sent it on to a health system or got it lost in the whatever. It was actually, let's use it for something else, that capability. So you should take your own position. Yeah.
So I imagine like there's sort of this new realm of ethics coming into design with all of this.
Here's what I noticed in San Francisco. A lot of these companies that are quite expansive and new are championed by people who have what you would identify as very good ethics, strong ethics. They all have amazing vision statements, etc. The people who are working there and the design departments that I talked to said after I presented, wow, how do you have time to think about these things? Like, we're just making the project and hoping that it fits the vision, but not really thinking about the consequences of. So and then there's a backlash against that, where all the people who are working on digital projects, of course, they're not making anything that you can see, so they're all going home and making things in their garage to feel that they've got their hands on something quite tangible. Yeah, it's really extremes, yeah, simultaneous extremes of things. So yes, we should be thinking about ethics. There's going to be a huge area of ethics and data. Yeah, anybody in law in here? Because it's a ripe opportunity, I think. It's laws are way behind.
And the next question is, where do you put the limits? That's all about it. Mm-hmm. And it touches every subject in society, not only design, of course.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Definitely. Do we have another question? Up there? No? No? Then we close up. That's over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim Colin.
Thank you. Thanks.